would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to it, everyone. It's November 2nd, Wednesday, 2016. We've got another one of those shows where I may have bitten off more than I can chew in terms of stuff I'd like to talk about today. Lots of interesting news relating to things that feed into things we've already talked about, setting the stage a little bit for maybe expecting that pivot point we've talked about a few times is in full swing, but we'll see how some of that plays in here. As always, the very best way to reach me is through the website at therebelbroker.com. Feel free to head on over. We are also closing out, or did close out, the drawing at 5 p.m. on Tuesday for the winner of November's $50 Amazon gift card. I have reached out to that person, but I'm hoping to hear back from them before I announce it officially, because I like, obviously if the email address I send it to doesn't work, they don't get it. So I get a verification reply first, and then I'll share with everyone here that has happened. So for all of those who jumped in and registered and did so to support the show and get an opportunity to win this $50 gift card, don't panic if you don't get an email from me. You will get another chance in December. Yes, we're going to go ahead and do another drawing in December. So just keep heading on over to therebelbroker.com. For those of you who haven't already done so, click the big red button at the top that says take the survey to support the show. Both times you're asked, use the same email address, answer the few questions that are presented, and you are good to go, and you are officially entered. While you're there, if you'd like to get in contact with me, just click on Contact the Rebel Broker. Send along any ideas, suggestions, observations, or questions that you might have. I'd be happy to reply. And finally, if you are interested in becoming a member of the Rebel Underground, just text the word Rebel Broker to the number 44222. That's text the word Rebel Broker, all one word, to the number 44222, and you will get access to all kinds of information that the rest of the folks don't get. You'll also get access to free content. So take advantage of that. And once you're on the list, you'll be sort of on the inside scoop, as it were, in the world of real estate realities. The other thing I'd point you to is if you'd like to support the show and still do the things you do all the time anyway, just head on over to the website, click the Support the Show menu item, and you'll be able to go visit the Amazon store or also go view a list of sponsors. And, of course, if you purchase anything through the Amazon store when you're using my store, you're supporting the show. A little bit of what you spend gets kicked over to the show. And then, of course, if you end up using any of the services from the sponsors that are on the sponsor page, I get a little something for that as well. And that all helps the show grow and move forward and deliver more for you. And on that, I guess I can mention, I finally did, I think I may have mentioned it a couple of shows ago, I had done a test run of delivering the video that I've promised in terms of doing a screen capture of finding a property and doing the property investment analysis. That did not go well, but I have, as of today, I finally did a test run today of the new software I got my hands on, and this is going to work fantastic. It's not only going to allow me to show you cool software tools, websites, other kinds of stuff, and give you some actual hands-on visual ways to see how to use these tools. It's also going to let me do the same thing with iPhone applications. So when I'm out and tooling around, I don't just use my realtor stuff. I'll also use tools that help me get a better insight into the marketplace that I'm in. So I'll be able to help you guys walk through all of that stuff. So great tool. I'm actually kind of creating now a list of different cool things that I can produce And of course, as I mentioned, all the stuff you do to support the show just makes that more possible and makes it happen on a faster schedule. So thank you for that, for those of you who decide to participate by doing that. All right, let's go ahead and jump in. We're gonna revisit my old favorite, and we're gonna be talking about automation. I've talked about automation before, and that's everything from the new kiosks at fast food stores to driverless cars, all these different things that we've talked about that are going to have a huge impact on the employment landscape. And the reason I bring that up, and the reason I keep hitting this one, is this is what feeds a healthy marketplace. And having folks with jobs, having folks earning an income, that's what it's all about. If you don't have any of those things going, you have a dead real estate market. So it's absolutely critical. And I think that any investor, well, heck, anybody, whether you're a buyer who's trying to anticipate what your competition is going to be like, or you're a seller trying to figure out how robust the market is going to be to sell down the road, whether you're an investor trying to figure out if people are going to be able to pay your rent or handle your flip, or how robust the market's going to be, you want to know what's going on with employment. I mean, it's the very first thing people ask when you go to get a loan. So to get a better handle on where things are going, and I think a key thing on knowing what's going to happen there is being able to anticipate what sort of different things are going to happen with employment. So we add another brick. You'll see why that was funny in a minute. Boy, I'm hilarious. Another brick in the wall in terms of our discussion about what's happening with employment. There's a new article from MarketWatch. A robot could build much of your next house. Fast Brick Robotics says its Hadrian X robot will build the shell of a building in just 2 days, replacing weeks of work by masons. Not only do they have sort of a cute little graphic, a computer-generated graphic, they have an actual robot doing it in a video on the page for this article, if you'd like to go check it out. That's pretty amazing stuff, but here's another one, and this one's particularly interesting. There's a new robot chef that can cook any of 2,000 meals at the tap of a button. It's to go on sale in 2017. So this isn't even, a theory. This is something that's going to get developed. Here's what's interesting. Now, we've talked about this before in terms of why this new stage of automation is so much different from previous stages of automation. What we're seeing, and Tesla is another good example of this. The new Tesla S that they're going to come out with next year or later this year doesn't have auto driving ability when you buy it, but they tell you that with a software update next year, it will. So that's the point. They're making hardware where in order for you to get this new feature, for these things to get built in, you don't have to buy a new piece of hardware. It's just something that gets enabled via software. All of the sensors and what's going to get used for all of these automated things are already known. It's just a question of creating the software that can do it. It's happening with Tesla. It's happening with cars and buses. We've talked about tanker ships. They're going to be autopiloted or have a dramatically reduced crew because of automation. We've talked about fast food. Here's an example where you could buy, and this is going to sell for $15,000. This is a thing you can buy for your house that will start off with over 2,000 recipes, but you could download as many more as you want. You could make up your own. I'd suggest you take a look at this because it's actually pretty dang cool. But this $15,000 thing will do all your cooking, and it's not you having to buy tons of robotic-friendly cookware. It is a pair of robotic hands that will use all of your stuff to cook food. It is absolutely amazing. And here's the thing. This is cooking, but this is just software running the hands. As soon as you can get those hands onto a mobile platform, you just slap that sucker onto a box with wheels. Suddenly, the amount of things that you could have an automated system do that doesn't require specialized hardware, it can simply use the tools that humans have been using to do the same job. That, I think, is the tip-over point. And this is a perfect example of something that seems far too human to be emulated by a robot. And here we go, cooking. take a look at it. I think it'll probably blow your mind. So that's the cooking invention. The other invention, as I mentioned, is the heavy construction robot, the Hadrian X. Let's see, named after the Roman Emperor Hadrian because of Hadrian's Wall. Nice. I like that. Nice reference. Once commercially available, this amazing robot will be capable of laying approximately 1,000 bricks per hour, which means that it could build the entire shell of a building in just 2 days, rather than 4 to 6 weeks of hard labor needed for a human crew to complete the same task. Hadrian X is the second iteration of the house-building robot from the Australia-based Fast Brick Robotics that could disrupt the 1.3 trillion global construction market and slash the cost of construction. The first one, a technology demonstrator called Hadrian 105, could provide an output of only 225 bricks per hour, so its successor would represent a substantial upgrade. Let's see. Aside from laying bricks much faster than its older cousin, Hadrian X will make sure they fit perfectly by grinding, milling, cutting, and routing different brick sizes to where they belong on the project. So you're getting absolute customization that people often argued was only possible with human interactions. I'm going to do it. Let's dovetail this with stuff we've talked about before, where in other constructions, remember we talked about this was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, there is a robot being used or that's about to get implemented to start building high rises. So the metal welding and all those things that are going on to build high rises, you can get robots to take now the majority of that work. So not only are we seeing this continuing sort of at a pace that we've talked about here on this show now for over a year, we're actually seeing it accelerate. It's jumping into more markets faster and faster. And I bring this up so that you can really do a bit of soul searching to figure out where you are professionally. Is this something you need to worry about in your industry? And be ready for this. These are some amazing things. And the point this makes about it reducing building costs, I think is awesome, because I think that's extensively true. I think that suddenly you'll be able to do things that you couldn't have imagined doing before because the labor costs are so much. And particularly when you can then cut the construction time down from weeks to days. I think we're looking at a revolution not only of an employment sector, but potentially the productivity sector. And everybody really needs to be prepared for that. Okay, next. We've talked a little bit recently about the changing face of the buyer pool out there. And one thing I find super interesting is how the story has changed from all of the experts about the millennial buyer. Does anyone remember what the stuff we were quoting about a year ago from the millennial buyer? All the things they were telling us about how the millennials are this way and that way, and that's why they're not going to buy and they're going to stay in basements. And my point was always, no, that's not the way it is. Millennials are doing what they're doing for reasons that are very specific to economy and the other types of things. And that when those things change, they'll change. They'll come up with a different plan. Well, and so now all of these same pundits who are saying we could not expect to see millennials jumping in and being active are now touting how much growth we've seen in the millennials jumping into the marketplace. Now, I actually am a little bit surprised by millennials jumping in terms of becoming a larger number of folks buying. I'm still not convinced we're seeing what they're selling us, though. They're telling us that millennials are making up a bigger percentage of the buyers out there. And I think that may be true, but I don't think that necessarily equals a larger number of millennials. It simply may be that the other groups of buyers have simply shrunk and millennials have remained sort of at the same level. It wouldn't surprise me if that ends up being the truth. But from the standpoint of the pool of buyers you have to work with, it is absolutely true that the number of millennials within that group is growing. But if the numbers I'm seeing locally are any indicator, the number of buyers is going down a bit. So it's less about thinking in terms of dealing with more buyers where the millennials are a bigger percentage of them. It's more about having fewer buyers where millennials make up a bigger portion of those that are left. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Another neat little news item. Appraisal volume rise was short-lived. We talked about this. It did fall back down, and it continues a downward trend. It had a brief rise last week. I'm not real sure how to explain that. I think I had a little trouble explaining it at the time because it sure didn't make sense that we were seeing an increase. One way that it could increase it would be if Remember how we were talking about I was noticing a greater number of bank-owned properties that had not been on the market for years suddenly coming on the market. Well, typically what banks do before they are going to look at selling more of their inventory, if they have it, is get it appraised. So now I can't help but wonder if that little jump in appraisals was more institutional, if it was more banks looking at getting appraisals of their own properties to figure out if this was the sweet spot for them to finally sell some of those properties they're still holding. So that theory may hold some water, just given some of the truth I saw in my local area. Now, there's a 1.3% drop in the National Appraisal Volume Index for the week of October 23rd, which nearly wiped out the 1.5% gain from the prior week. 8 of the last 10 weeks recorded negative results. So we're seeing a decline, and when you do the week to week, that's honestly expected for this time of year. You are expected to see a lower number of purchases, which equals lower numbers of appraisals in the wintertime. That's a normal thing, and we usually don't see this start to ramp back up. If the market jumps back very early, we could see it as early as January, but normally you want to compare this to the same time last year. And from what I understand, really what we're seeing is on par, a little bit less than what we were seeing at the same time last year. But again, I think that's normal too, as we've seen sort of the inventory problem is really feeding into that issue. All right. Another interesting change, well, you know what? Let's take a quick break here, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about another interesting sort of demographic change among buyers that's probably going to be a good one for you to know about. So stay right there. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909.
Welcome back, everyone. We did a little bit of one of my pet subjects, a little bit about robots earlier in the show, or not robots, just automation in general, that I think is really just going to ramp up and continue to be a big element of reshaping the employment landscape for everyone. Then we also talked about appraisal volume and where it's at, and it's of course lower as we head into the winter, but it's also lower compared to last year. And another thing I wanted to cover, as we did yesterday, relating to looking at the makeup of the buyer pool. Who are the folks that are buying? What are folks looking for in terms of what they're buying? And how do you create a marketing strategy that touches on as many of the hot buttons that are going to convince all of the various segments of the buying public to rent your property, buy your property, whatever it is that you want them to do? And one that's interesting that I didn't get from anything real estate specific, but I thought it was a very interesting statistic, is the number of homeschooled students has doubled since 1999. Now, according to this article from the Washington Post, about 1.8 million U.S. children were homeschooled in 2012, more than double the number that were homeschooled in 1999. Estimated number of homeschooled children represents 3.4% of the U.S. student population between the ages of 5 and 17. The increase was fastest between 1999 and 2000, then slowed between 2000 and 2012, according to the estimates from the National Center for Education Statistics. Let's see here. An estimated 4 in 10 homeschoolers had parents who graduated from college, while about 1 in 10, these are numbers that actually don't help us too much. About 1/3 live in, and this is data that I think you should be aware of. About 1/3 of them live, because it's not an equal distribution. So depending on where your property is, you may want to spend a little time figuring out ways to demonstrate the appeal of your property to folks within this segment. So about 1/3 of them live in rural areas, while slightly more than 1/3 live in the suburbs and slightly less than 1/3 live in the cities. So it's actually a fairly even distribution, but with a higher level of emphasis in the rural and suburb areas. Researchers conducted the homeschooling survey of nationally representative sample of students via telephone from 1999 to 2007. Let's see here. And that's kind of it. And so here's what my point is. When you're putting together your marketing and you're figuring out the folks that make up the biggest chunks of your buyer pool out there, it doesn't mean that you need to take your marketing and aim it 100% at any one of these segments. But when I'm marketing, I like to try and find little bits and pieces, little bits that you can dabble on your marketing to give it that extra appeal. Something, it can be just one thing that can make the difference. Now, I frequently will mention things like easy access to a private airfield, particularly if I'm selling more expensive properties for those folks who may own a plane or want to own a plane. The ability to have horses boarded locally, something I'll frequently mention, again, depending on where that property is located. For something like this, if I had a property in a rural area and I knew that there were a good number of folks who lived in those areas and wanted to move to those areas who would be interested in homeschooling, maybe mention a strong local homeschooling group. Now, these folks usually get together. We have a homeschooling group right here in Morgan Hill that's very strong. And there are different schools that will interact with homeschoolers in terms of having them come to their social events, those types of things. Simply by including a mention, you don't need to do a whole page on it. You don't need to do a full marketing spread. But by understanding that these folks are part of your buying population, you can just put one little item in there that's going to catch their eye. What other home listing, rental listing, or whatever is going to mention that? I know that sounds nuts, but frequently things don't click in someone's head until they hear it. So, and it's all about what we've talked about before, giving a room context. It's why you stage a home. If you get past all the various hurdles that we've talked about, the online hurdle, make sure your property looks as good as possible so they want to take the next step, which is the drive-by. Make sure that in the drive-by, your house has as best curb appeal as you can possibly give it. Then once they're inside, it's delivering on what folks are going to want there. But oftentimes that first germ of a thought that gets them to thinking about your property first is one little bullet point item that you put in that would have applied to every single other property in the neighborhood that's currently listed, but you mentioned it and no one else did. So you can simply put in there, and it's very easy to find these things out. Google homeschooling in your local neighborhood or in your local area. Your real estate professional is probably going to be plugged in to some degree. But if you're not doing it, if you're doing the self-guided thing, you're renting and you are not really wanting to work with a real estate professional, you don't want to do the whole property management thing, just figure these things out for yourself and include mentions of things that would be attractive to all the various segments that represent the different chunks of buyers in your area. And there's absolutely no reason why you can't cover the entire spectrum. We talked about single women yesterday. We've talked about now homeschool folks becoming bigger portions of the population. We've talked about the millennials. We talked about retirees. We talked about a lot of different groups. And for each one of those, you can make mention of a feature or something your home offers that would appeal to that group so that your home gets the top level of attention versus other homes out there in terms of just trying to compete for that eye time. You want eyeballs on your property, and that's something that's going to kick that stuff off for you. Okay. Next, wow, am I actually going to make it through all the various stories? We had one more story that I thought sounded interesting, and I thought I would share it with you. It's from the U.S. News and World Report's folks, and it's 6 ways to successfully snoop a neighborhood. So I thought we'd run through these in the time we have left to give you an idea of, A, what do you do in terms of sort of sussing out, and that's another word. See, there it is. I used dovetailed and sussed out in the same show. And that was something that was pointed out to me. Anyway, 6 ways to successfully check out your neighborhood. And I want to sort of do a crossover of this. I want to say, all right, let's assume U.S. News and World Reports knows what they're talking about. But then let's sort of quickly do an analysis to figure out, could I do this remotely? Let's say I'm someone who wants to invest. I have, because of all the wonderful shows we've done here on different places to consider investing and why, maybe one of those really stood out. So now you want to try to not only get to the point where you're looking in broad strokes in terms of what general areas of the city look most appealing, have the most reason to consider looking there. Now maybe we want to get down to the neighborhood level. We want to get down to the street level and figure out what makes sense. So let's go through their list. Their first suggestion is to snoop social media. I totally agree with that. I think that's a great way to go. And a lot of times these things will come up when you're doing general Google searches. But doing things, almost all neighborhoods, at least around here, have Facebook pages. They have the larger communities do, and frequently you'll find that if you get onto Facebook and discover the local police department, it'll give you a little bit of a clue into how much different neighborhoods are taking up the police officers' time. That's also a good thing to know. According to them, with the plethora of information provided throughout social media, use it to your advantage as you look for more information on where you're moving. Neighborhoods and subdivisions often create pages for upcoming events, important notifications, and yes, that annoying neighborhood gossip. While not all of these pages are made public, you may have to find a friend who is a member or directly message the page administrator to gain access. Now, let me give you an example. The community I live in has one of these pages, and it's arranged as a forum. And you need to have an address inside the community before they'll give you access to it. So frequently you're going to find that's not something you can do up front. I know that the folks here, even if you're interested in buying in the community, will not give you access, for instance. So don't count on universal acceptance of you getting access to all neighborhood exchanges of information. However, the public part of that will also usually share with you some interesting information about the community. Number 2 on their top 6 list, take a hike. After exploring the digital realm, take a look at the neighborhood in person is the best next step. Take your time to drive, walk, and explore not only the neighborhood you're zeroing in on, but the surrounding ones as well. Pay attention to the neighbors, how they interact with one another, and how they keep their houses. Okay, could you do this remotely? Yeah, you know what? While taking a hike, getting the ground truth and really seeing it for yourself without looking it through the screen on your computer is always preferable. If that's not a realistic option, you can absolutely take a stroll down the street virtually of just about anywhere in the nation. Go to Google Maps, go into Street View, and just start looking around. Now, usually, those images are anywhere from a year to 3 years old. They tend, at least in my area, and I am in Tech Central. So this is where Google is, right? So it tends to get updated far more frequently here. You can figure that out frequently in what you're doing to get an idea of how old these photos are. But at least it gives you a feel for it as it existed at some time in the recent past. Not an absolute substitute for walking it yourself, but a great way maybe to calibrate yourself in general to different areas and help you focus a little bit more on the areas that you're most interested in. Grab a drink. This one seemed odd to me. This may be the single most enjoyable piece of advice you get when it comes to house hunting. Grab a beer, find a local restaurant that has a bar and head in for a drink, but make sure you sit at the bar. Why so specific? A restaurant will attract all types of people, but the bar portion fosters conversation. While you sit and relax after scoping out the neighborhoods, you can either sit back and people watch or strike up a conversation. A more clearly painted picture can never be found than from the one painted by the people who live there. So I think that's a great idea. Not something I've done. My version of this is the Starbucks or the local coffee shop. I'll go in and I've done this before. I did it. And sometimes you get people who think you're nuts, but I've struck up conversations with folks who live in a town where I'm visiting and I'm interested in getting a little bit more information about how they feel about town. A good example of this is when I went out to Colorado and I was looking at a lot of different communities just north of Denver. And that was my thing. Denver's a coffee drinking town, so I would, whenever I'd stop for anything, and I'd chat people up about what they like and don't like about the area. So you can find great insights there. It doesn't need to be a beer. If you like beer, great, do a beer. If you want to do it with the folks who are getting a coffee, going to work just as well there. So spread that philosophy out a little bit more broadly than just the local pub. Do your homework. And this one's clearly one we can do online. Now that you're refreshed, it's time to get back to the grindstone. Work with your real estate agent to dig up comparable sales over the past several years to find out if the neighborhood you're looking at is in line with the local and national trends. Okay, local. Who cares about national trends if you've already decided to focus on that area? The national trends have nothing to do with your local area. There are going to be ups and downs in every market, but make sure your specific neighborhood isn't raising its own unique red flags. So ground truth, we've talked about that before. Declining home values when the rest of the city is increasing can signify a bad investment down the line. Great tools you can do without having used that you don't have to. Wow. Great tools that you can use to help you not have to consult with a real estate person. Zillow, Trulia, those are some good tools to use. Redfin. I strongly suggest that at some point, though, before you spend your money, you absolutely want to get a real estate agent's input. They can pull up a lot of very good data. I know there are some states out there that do not let the MLS system capture what a property sells for. They don't even make that public information. So that's going to make it a little bit tougher for you. But that means you need to grab onto absolutely, it raises the bar in terms of you needing to grab onto a real estate professional so that you can get an idea of what things are selling for. Because you know what? Whether it is legal or not to share that information publicly, the agents are going to know, right? It's hard for them to complete a real estate transaction without knowing what the price was. And this may be one of the few instances where you might be better served by an agent that actually works for a bigger office. And I actually can't believe I'm saying it, but for this specific piece of data, in those states where they don't publish the what property sold for numbers, these folks are going to know and not only have access to their numbers, they're likely going to have access to the numbers from the entire office. So not just the homes they personally were involved with, they can probably get good data from the agents within that office. I know if I was a broker in a state that didn't allow that and I was legally allowed to do it, I'd absolutely have my own database of what homes were selling for based on the ones I was involved with. Become a private eye is their next suggestion. You may find your agent isn't able to provide some of the information you hoped for. Fair housing laws and many real estate associations prohibit agents from discussing any crime statistics about a neighborhood. A general rule of thumb, agents are there to discuss houses, not people. Begin your research with larger sites like crimereports.com and neighborhoodscout.com, and then move on to Google for more targeted information. You'll find that Trulia and Zillow, I think it's Trulia, has the heat map overlay of crime, which I've used several times in properties that I've been evaluating. It's very helpful, at least to get a broad brush stroke idea of what's going on with crime rates in different areas. Let's see, the next one, scout the schools. This is their sixth one. Schools don't affect just those with children. They offer insight into community pride, local economic strength, and can seriously affect the resale of your home. Now, we talked about this one before. This is, even though I am in a position, and as I mentioned, I'm looking to move, even though all my boys are going to be graduating from high school within the next 2 years, no matter where I move, they're not changing schools. They don't go to a public school, so I get to leave them where they are. But I am still going to insist that the property I buy is going to be in a better school area because I recognize two things. One, you don't make your money when you sell your house. You make your money when you buy your house. So you make smart decisions when you buy so that later when you do sell, you're going to get the greatest number of buyers willing to pay the greatest price and conditions for your property. So make sure that schools are on your list of things to consider. If it's not that big of a deal to you and you're finding it too difficult to buy a home in an area with a really good school, and that's why that home is so expensive, it's because it's in a better school area, that one's going to save its value. The one you're at may or may not save its value. At least try to do a compromise. If you can't go to the school that's rated a 10 out of 10 on Great Schools or School Digger or U.S. News Best High Schools, at least get one that's not a 2. While the house may be super cheap in that area, it's going to stay super cheap in that area, and you're likely not going to make a lot of money in terms of appreciation on your property. I think schools are one of the top things that has an influence on sustaining property values over time. And so I always suggest my buyers take that into account, whether they have kids or plan to have kids or not. All right. Wow, we've covered an awful lot of, I have no idea what I'm going to title this show because we've covered a really good swath of information. I'll just maybe pick one at random and go with it. Thank you very much for spending your valuable time listening to me go on about this stuff. I hope that the information I've provided is valuable and helps you make the best possible decisions in your real estate world. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'll talk to y'all next time.